I'm going to introduce you to the anatomy of the human skeleton. We'll start with the skull. The large bone area at the back of the head, okay, sometimes referred to as the brain case, we call the cranium. Okay. If you look at the shape of the cranium, the tendency in drawing is to draw it round, okay, but think of it more as shaped like an egg or a rugby ball. Okay. It's elongated front to back. Okay. From the front, okay. The skull is narrower at the front than it is at the back, okay, and then it tapers round to the occipital bone at the back. The widest part of the skull, okay, is at the parietal eminence, which is here. Okay, it's about 2/3 of the way back on the skull. Parietal eminence comes from the parietal bones, which form the two bones at the top of the skull, which meet at the middle. Okay, it's important when drawing, when you think about proportions of the skull, that the parietal eminence exceeds the width of the cheekbones. Okay, the tendency is to draw the cheekbones wider than the back of the skull. Okay, the widest part of the skull is here, so be aware of that when you're drawing. Okay. At the back of the skull, this important point here is called the occipital protuberance. If you feel on the back of your head, you can feel that at the base of your skull. Okay, and that's an important attachment point for muscles. Okay, behind the ear, okay, here, this is the mastoid process. This bone, if you feel behind your ear, you can feel that again. Okay, when you're drawing the neck, okay, you have the muscles which come down either side of your neck. Sternocleidomastoid muscles, they come down either side of your neck, and they attach to the sternum and your clavicles. Okay, but the attachment point for them on the skull is here. Okay, the mastoid process. We look at the face. We have the orbits of the eye. Notice that they're not round. Okay, they're more rectangular in shape with curved edges. Okay, and they're at a slight angle upwards. Okay, facing in this direction. Okay, the shape is created by the bone. You have the zygomatic bone of the cheek. Okay, and the zygomatic arch passes around. Okay, from the front of the face. Runs along the side of the face, okay, and then ends up here with the ear hole directly underneath it. This is the nasal aperture. The nose, okay, the nasal bone. You have the root of the nose where the nose joins the skull, okay, and then the bony area here which comes out, okay, from the side is the bridge of your nose. That's called the bridge. The rest of the nose then is cartilage. Okay, so you have cartilage running down to create this area at the front. Okay. Top part of your muzzle, your mouth, okay, is called the maxilla. Okay, and it's formed like a cylinder on the front of the face. Okay, it's a rounded area, cylindrical in form. Okay. And then the lower part of the jaw, it's a little bit loose on this one here. It's called a mandible. Okay, this is your mandible. Okay, and then this part leading up is called the rama of the jaw. Okay. Next, we look at the bones of the spine, or correctly, the vertebral column. Think about them as a whole first, and look at the angle, which is important for drawing. Notice the neck is leaning forward as it enters the skull, and then the spine curves outwards as it runs through the thorax, okay, and then dives back into the body through the lumbar region here, okay, and then comes back out again into the sacrum and the coccyx at the bottom. So the spine runs through the body like an S curve, okay, tendency is in drawing is to draw it straight. We've got 7 cervical vertebrae, the vertebrae of the neck. Okay. The 7th cervical vertebrae is important, the last one, okay, here. If you feel at the back of your neck, okay, as your neck joins up to your body, you can feel the 7th cervical vertebrae. When we feel it, we say we can palpate, okay? We can palpate the bone, okay, so we feel it. So the 7th cervical vertebrae is an important mapping point, a bony landmark in the body, okay, for drawing. Okay. Between the 7th cervical vertebrae and the sternum is approximately a 45-degree angle, okay, which is important when you're constructing drawings of the body. We have 12 thoracic vertebrae, each one related to a pair of ribs, okay, and then there are 5 lumbar vertebrae in the lower back. Okay. The remainder of the spinal column, okay, is the bones here of the sacrum, okay, which sits between the bones of the pelvis, okay, and then at the bottom our vestigial tail in the coccyx. Okay, so 24 movable bones, okay, 33 in total, including the fused bones of the sacrum and the coccyx. Moving on to the ribs. The rib cage is an egg-shaped structure, okay, with a small aperture at the top, and then getting wider as the ribs go down through the body into a wide opening, which tapers off slightly at the bottom. So if it would carry on tapering in, it would imagine it as an egg. The ribs connect at the back of the body into the spine, okay, and then they pass round and through to the front of the body, okay, where some of them connect to the sternum here at the front. The sternum is in 3 parts, this one bone through the middle of the ribs. The top is called the manubrium, okay. The main body of it is called the shaft or the blade, okay. And then this part of the end is called the xiphoid process. We've got ribs in pairs as they pass down through. We've got 7 pairs of true ribs. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, and those 7 ribs are called true ribs because they connect to the sternum directly by cartilage. Okay, on the skeleton, the cartilage is shown by this clear plastic. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 true ribs. Okay, underneath that you'll see 3 what we call false ribs. So 1, 2, 3. They are still part of the main structure of the rib cage, okay, but they don't connect directly to the sternum. They connect to the cartilage of the 7th rib, okay, by more cartilage. Okay, so that's what distinguishes them from the 7 true ribs. Okay, and then at the back we have 2 floating ribs. Okay, so small bones here, 1, 2, 2 floating ribs, which don't connect to the front of the body at all. We look now at the shoulder girdle, comprising of the clavicle, okay, the collarbone, and the shoulder blade. Okay. The clavicles are an S-shaped bone, again. So they connect to the sternum, okay, and the connection at the sternum is the only point at which the shoulder girdle is directly attached by bone to bone in the body, okay, which gives us lots and lots of movement, the great scope of movement that we have. We have this one small attachment. The bones are connected elsewhere by muscle, but bone to bone, that's the only point at which they connect at the sternoclavicular joint here. Okay. The clavicle passes from the front of the body, okay, and then it curves, okay, back up through the body and connects with the shoulder blade. Okay. On these anatomical skeletons, they tend to sit very level, or sometimes they even, like this one here, will droop downwards. Okay. When you're life drawing, the clavicles more often than not will be angled back up again. So don't don't look at what you're seeing here and think that that's what's happening in real life. Okay, in real life, the clavicles will pass at an angle up from the sternum and back into the body much more. Okay, you don't see that on these skeletons because they're not perfectly anatomically sound in the way they hang together. This would be raised up by the muscles that's underneath it. Okay, and so it's a curved bone that passes into the back of the body. Okay, and connects then here to the acromion of the scapula. Okay, the scapula is what we generally call the shoulder blade. Okay, this is the vertebral edge. Okay, close to the vertebrae. Okay, this is called the spine of the scapula. This bone here. Okay, and you can see that quite often on the surface of the body as a depression. When you see the skeleton on the surface of the body, sometimes when the bone is close to the surface, okay, when it's subcutaneous, the skeleton will look like a positive shape, like a knuckle, okay, or your ulna here, okay, you can see it as a raised area on the surface of the body, but often you'll be able to identify it as a depression, where the muscles that come out of the bone curve away and leave a depression where the bone is. Okay, so the spine of the scapula quite often you'll see as a depression. Okay, it's like a triangular bone. Okay, as I said, it comes around into the acromion. This is the flat area that you'll see at the edge of your shoulder. Okay, the flat area here. Okay, and then if you look inside, there's the glenoid fossa. There's a small area here where the bone of the humerus will attach. Okay. And you get this little notch down here at the front. Okay, this piece of bone is what your biceps attach to. Okay, and hang down from. And your corobrachialis. This is called the coracoid process. Okay, this little notch here is an important little piece of bone. Down into the pelvis. The pelvis is divided into two symmetrical halves. Each half comprises of three sections. The flat curved area at the top is the ilium, okay. The pubis at the front, and then at the back, the areas that you sit on, the bone that you sit on, is the ischium. This is the iliac crest. Most often visible on the body is a depression between muscles. Okay. The acis, here this point at the front, anterior superior iliac spine. You can quite often locate that subcutaneously on the body. Is a connection point for muscles, but also for the Poupart's ligament, which runs between the acis and the pubis here. On the back, we have the acis on the front. This is the piscis. Okay, posterior superior iliac spine. These 2 points are important in drawing. Okay, quite often you can see them on the base of the spine. Okay, as two dimples. Okay, these are the two dimples you see at the base of the back in the lumbar region. If you can locate the two dimples, it's easy then to understand the angle of the pelvis and how that's sitting if you draw in the figure from a posterior view. That creates what we call the sacral triangle. Okay, sacral from the sacrum here. Okay, it's a small area at the base of the back. Down into the leg, then we have the femur, which is the longest, strongest bone in the body. Connects into the pelvis here at the acetabulum. Okay, it's a ball and socket joint. The ball here at the top of the femur. On the outside of that form is the greater trochanter. It's an important point to be aware of in drawing because the greater trochanter exceeds the width of the pelvis. Okay, if you're constructing bodies and you go in too big with the pelvis, you have to remember that the greater trochanter will sit outside of that line. Okay. Down through the length of the femur. On the inside we have the lesser trochanter here. Okay. At the end of the femur you have the condyles. Okay. If there's a tendency in drawing the skeleton, it's to do them too small. Okay. And the femur, as it sits in the body, runs diagonally through the leg. Okay, from the trochanter down to the knee. Okay, runs diagonally through the thigh. So at the end of the femur, one end here is longer than the other, so that when it sits diagonally, it's flat. Okay. The patella, on these models, the patella is screwed to the outside of the femur. Okay, but in reality, the patella floats within a tendon, sits within a tendon that runs across the knee, so that when the knee is flexed, the tendon, the patella will float down and cover that gap in the joint, okay, and protect the ligaments inside, which is rather important. Into the lower leg, the two bones of the lower leg, this is the tibia, and then the thinner fibula on the outside of the leg. In drawing, the triangular platform at the top of the tibia here is easily discernible on the surface form of the body. It's subcutaneous. Okay, and then we can trace the curve of the shin down into the medial malleolus. Okay, your malleoli are the ankle bones. Okay, so the medial malleolus, medial refers to inside to the center of the body, lateral away from the center of the body. The lateral malleolus comes from the fibula. When you're drawing the relationship between medial and lateral malleoli, notice that there's a 45-degree angle approximately between the two, okay, rather than putting them straight opposite each other. Okay. Also, quite visible often on the surface of the body subcutaneously is the head of the fibula, which sits on the outside of the body below the knee, okay, on the lateral side on the outside of the body. You can quite often see this point here. We're down into the arms. Okay. The upper bone is the humerus. There's the head of the humerus here, rounded area that would articulate with the glenoid fossa in the scapula. Okay. The arms hang a little lower than they should on these models that we have. Down through the shaft of the bone and into the condyles. Okay, the medial condyle sticks out quite a long way here on the inside. You can find that quite easily near the surface of the body on the inside. Okay. Down into the bones of the lower arm, the forearm. Okay. We have the radius, which always relates to the thumb side of the arm. Okay, the radius here. Okay, which doesn't articulate directly with the skeleton. It's attached to the biceps tendon. Okay, which gives us range of movement, which we'll talk about in a moment. The fixed bone, the thinner of the two, is the ulna, okay, which at the elbow, turn this round, gives us the olecranon, okay, the elbow bone. Okay. And then the ulna runs down parallel here when the hand is facing the front, okay. We call that the reference position, okay, where the bones are parallel, okay, also called supination. Okay, and then when the palm is turned over, it's called pronation. Okay, and then the bones, when that happens, the bones cross over each other. Okay, and then you have the radius sitting over and crossing over the ulna, which creates a kind of thickening in the arm. Okay, for drawing. At the ulna, you can trace through the arm from the olecranon. Okay. Here's the olecranon here. You can trace it through the gap in the muscles, okay, along the side until it re-emerges back on the surface, okay, at this point on your wrist, the bony protrusion here on